When they sell news in a proxy war, grudges was the burdens of humanity. Comparison and so competition. To communicate, to be understood, how to eat, they sell views. Trading blind spots. Humble yourself, you're highly programmed. Paradox universe is pivotal in another direction. Restoring narratives, persona became the person. These autobiographies chasing impossible answer. Skill, technique, inadequate honesty. Machine learning out to human efficiency. To explain ourselves, they can hear, can they listen, and elaborate, can they feel it? They sell news in a proxy war. Hashtag transactional acquisition. We worship God cause of daily bread. And money economy must get to eat. They sell news in a proxy war. Holding culturally codified. Cause dyslexia because of aphasia. Cause social climate is like and have that. They felt used as but your political power play. Unipolar. And they felt used in a proxy war. I won't go along with it no more. She made a promise as a child. She never broke her rights. Restoring narrative persona became a person. These autobiographies facing impossible answer. Skill, technique, inadequate Tennessee. Machine learning now to human efficiency. To explain.
And the rise of Zion, the Rastafari reasoning. And tonight, conversation will be led by Professor Imhotep Alagidede. Prof. Imhotep is with the University of Ghana, Accra, and he's also with the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. He's the Chancellor for Now Valley Multiversity. Unfortunately, I was speaking not knowing it wasn't captured. I was trying to introduce the speaker for tonight, Professor Imhotep. Since some of us may not have listened to him or is not very much aware of who he is, the intent was to introduce him formally to us. But it looks like I wasted enough time in doing that. In brief, Professor Imhotep is a meta-economist and a transdisciplinary scholar with an avid interest in the phenomena behind phenomena. He is an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and an accomplished academic who has enriched our understanding of the optimal provision of local and global public goods. He is currently the discipline lead of finance and economics at the University of Witwatersrand Business School and the occupant of the Maiden Bank of Ghana chair in finance and economics at the University of Ghana. One important thing I would like to share is that Prof's research interest is tilted towards a synthesis of the thesis and antithesis in all disciplines. He believes strongly in the value of multidisciplinary research and has constantly taken a Pan-African approach to rigorous scientific analysis of Africa's resource endowment and development challenges with a view to preferring alternative maps based on indigenous law. Over the past quarter of a century, Prof has launched a series of transformative social enterprises aimed at bridging the gaps between academia and industry, science and master science, He's the president and chancellor of the Nile Valley Multiversity, and he has successfully evolved new frameworks in biodynamic agriculture to improve our knowledge of sustainable food and nutrition from farm to fork. And as the executive director of RF Consults, Prof provides world-class consultancy, training, and advisory services for corporates, government, and international organizations. I'd like to welcome you all to the Rastafari Reasoning, organized by the Education Commission of the Rastafari Council, Ghana. Tonight's presentation, like I mentioned earlier, is on the topic Crystal Vibrations and the Rise of Zion, a Rastafari Reasoning. And reasoning will be led by Professor Imhotep Alagidede, who I just shared a brief profile about him. I would like to share with us the purpose of the Rastafari Reasoning. Thank you. The purpose of this reasoning is to discuss, consult, and act together in focused exchanges of ideas, thoughts, views, knowledge, to comment on specific problems and air considered views on courses of action to best follow in dealing with the world, to help us come to terms with history, politics, economics, education, so that we don't repeat past errors. And instead of always trying to catch up with the world, our reasoning seeks to stimulate creative thinking. So I will invite the presenter, Professor Imhotep, to take the floor and lead the conversation. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Kopi, and thank you, brothers and sisters. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, whichever timeline you happen to find yourself. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you this evening here in Ghana, talking and sharing ideas, really, how we call it reasoning in the Rastafari movement, the concepts of crystals, the crystalline systems within our framework. So I thank Kofi and the leadership of the Rastafari Council Ghana for inviting me again. And I'm very grateful to all of you who have tuned in on world, off world, here in Ghana and elsewhere, joining in time and off time to share this moment of the crystal revolution. I am grateful to all the crystal beings, the elementals behind all the crystals that we talk about and are using in our various ways, and the various crystalline structures within our existence as humans on this planet. And thanks to all the trees, the plant people, as we call them, the four-legged people, the two-legged, and all the different sentients that have joined into this discussion. The last time we looked at the tree people, the plants, and we saw the role and the influence of the plant people in our life. Even the very idea of the plant standing shows rootedness, that is grounding. And grounded people are those that understand their value. They know who they are and where they are in this life journey. Being rooted is knowing the spot at which you stand. And that invitation to the tree people, we saw the role in industry, in architecture, art, and design, and everything. Literally, we concluded that the second exponent of the human kingdom is actually in the plant kingdom, and the trees and the other plants that we depend on as a civilization. And really, it's part of us. We are trees in motion, and there are trees that are situated or grounded in one place. Today, we're looking at one of the other most important kingdoms that we are actually part of, but for some reason, we are not so conscious of the activities of that kingdom, and that's the crystal beings. And by crystal, scientifically speaking, they tend to look at it as a solid material with a highly ordered and repeating atomic or molecular structure. So when you have these arranged in a 3D lattice, that becomes a crystal. If you look at it scientifically, therefore, any regular arrangement that gives this kind of characteristics can take different kinds of geometric forms that we know. We look at the solids and the cubes and the hexagonal structures. So crystals really form a foundation of the universe. It's the basis of our mathematics, the basis of our music, our various art forms, and our very structure as humans. In fact, if you take the definition to a much broader outlook, all the beings within the rocks, the mountains, and the beings in the other kingdoms that we call the stony tribes form part of the crystal kingdom. It's also the case that one of the most commonest crystals in our reality is actually water itself, because water at various vibratory rates and frequencies can transmute into many different forms. So typically cloud crystals tend to form before a rain falls. When you put water into a fridge, at certain temperatures, you can see a freezing point, and then water subjected to heat at another point can take a different crystalline shape. And we ourselves, according to our modern science, are composed of 70% of that substance. The planet in which we exist is also composed of that. So crystals, the commonest ones that we know of, usually can be the metallic type, such as gold and silver. These tend to have atoms that are tightly packed together in different lattices. When you have these lattices repeated, you always find these crystalline formations. And gold is one of the substances that we have in great abundance, not just in Ghana, but within the West African subregion and almost the entire continent. And this is known to us historically. Foreigners are familiar with the El Dorado, the African kingdoms, adorned with gold and silver and other kinds of metallic crystals. There are the ionic crystals, which the very common one we find in our kitchen, salt. It has very cubic type of lattices, so the atoms tend to be alternate. So you have the positive and negative ions in salt. That makes salt one of the most mystical and spiritually important universal crystal in our experience. We tend to use it commonly in soups and in food, but very importantly, beyond the physical properties, the esoteric side of salt that takes on so many levels, some of which we may know in this reasoning community. Even the seawater will tell us anything that gets into that type of situation will be neutralized in one way or the other. At certain times when you have dense energies build up, salt is one of the key ingredients that when you just put into the corner of the place can absorb all the toxicity and neutralize whatever ions that are charged in the atmosphere. And it's something that we all know, we use every day, we have. There is the kind of crystals that tend to bond covalently, such as diamonds and quartz. These type of stones, if you like, in some descriptions, diamonds, for instance, they are so common, especially in Ghana, if you are in the eastern region. In places like Apatia, Dankrono, Boedria, and the rest, at certain times rain will just wash the top surface and these crystals pop up in great quantities. The ones in Ghana are typically the industrial type of diamonds. So for almost all of our complicated cutting tools and construction equipment in the various industries, this is the key ingredient that boosts that type of activity. In Apatia, we used to have the diamond mines. Not sure whether they still operating. But we have these stones almost everywhere on the planet, and then on the continent, especially. In South Africa, places like Kimberley is very typically similar to Apatia, but the diamonds there are the gem type, the quality in terms of what we know today in our scales of measurement tend to look much more polished and readily used for adornments and jewelry and etc. Compared to the industrial type. Botswana supplies roughly about a quarter of the world's diamonds, as small a country as it is. So the entire basin of the Kalahari, from Namibia all the way to Botswana and various parts of the southern part of Africa, especially in Zimbabwe, are littered with these stones. So it was one of the most commonest crystals that you can find on the planet, especially in Africa. So the atoms here tend to bond in tetrahedral type of lattices. So you can have the downward sloping triangle superimposed on the upward sloping triangle. And now you have a tetrahedron. And this is the symbol commonly referred to as the Star of David. When you have the feminine and the masculine conjoined, in that union, communion, you can create vehicles. Sometimes it's discussed in the literature of various types of vehicles that we can use to transport ourselves into different dimensions and portals. And this is one of the very important features of the type of crystals that tend to bond in tetrahedral format. So the quartz crystal, which is also one of the commonest crystals on the planet, is typically in this range of classification. You have quartz in different shapes and sizes, but they also take different colors. Those in the beauty and love industry, rose quartz would be very commonly used for adornments. And the nature of its color also tend to evoke feelings of love, and therefore having those types of crystals around tend to, clear the energy and the space for that type of atmosphere to occur. There are also the gemstones, many of which can be stones like rubies and emeralds, sapphires. They tend to be a little bit more rare compared to the quartz and the diamonds and maybe even gold and silver. So their rarity also tend to obviously have an effect on how they are priced and looked at in economics. And so they are typically very expensive because the supply is just very tiny, the global sphere. But these types of crystals are very useful in many ways in the beauty industry and also the monetary systems of the planet. So crystals today have assumed a very important role, but we haven't still discovered most of the deepest meanings and understandings around crystals. And it is for that reason that this talk is really about raising the awareness around the crystals, getting us more acquainted with certain types of crystals that are commonly available to us, and looking at a few uses of those crystals beyond the daily notions of salt in our soups and stews, and maybe quartz as bracelets and diamonds as rings in our fingers. And it's also to invite you, brothers and sisters and friends and loved ones, to participate in this experience, because if we will be able to dream and create new structures and patterns in our mind, It is the entire crystalline structure that we talk about that can evoke that type of atmosphere for us to get to the brain states that enables us to manifest as the real beings that we are. So in the crystals, I looked at the topic in relation to where we are as the people of the Most High. Our souls have longed so long and so much. They return to Zion, a place where bliss never left. And our humanity have gone through so much trauma and torment. Domination and control has clouded our basic existence to such an extent that I and I still finds that trying to move forward, there's no way out. Going backward, there's no way out. And there's no way out of the restrictions and constrictions around us. And crystals provide an important portal for I and I to look deeply back into history, back into the very existence of I and tapping into the sacred wisdom and the elemental beings that hold the contracts for the crystalline matrix. So brethren and sisters, I also wrote a paper whilst doing the research for this reasoning, and I have shared it with a few brothers and sisters. It's in the initial draft, and so read it with the intention to also add to the discussion and enlarge the debate, for that's what it's really all about. The reasoning is to invite all of us from our different perspectives from which we take crystals. The musician will have a different relationship with the crystalline beings compared to an artist who draws and paints. And so it is with the farmer and the fishmonger. So we are invited to participate in this multidimensional exploration of the matter, the energy, and the consciousness of the crystalline kingdom, and how that particular knowledge can help to advance the cause of I as we march back into the secret place where we never left, the pristine moment of limitless and timeless existence where I has always been. And that's the invitation of the crystalline kingdom, getting all of us to understand how large and how beautiful this kingdom is, bringing us back to our experience of existence. So there are various types of crystals that I personally use in my neighborhood. I collect some of these in my travels, and some of them are gifts from friends and loved ones, and some just appear themselves to me wherever I go. Recently, we drilled a borehole, and it turned out some different layers of these in the very land in which we dwell. And here in Ghana, it's almost the case that anytime you go a few meters down, you find all kinds of crystals of various shapes and forms. So we are sitting in the crystal palace and the crystal planet. And that planet, at its very core, what science has so far found is that the cooling of molten magma that forces its way up through heat and pressure, it's always the process in which the different types of crystals take shape and form and come into our reality through the various stony and rock structures that we have. So we have some of the indigenous stories around the crystals. For instance, there is the crystals course that was given to the ancient people, the Mayans, especially the Aztec, mostly the Mesoamericans, but the African indigenous people who are the same strain across the Yucatan Peninsula, all the way to Siberia, to the Asia subcontinent and to the motherland. And in these crystals are the recordings of the planetary history that we no longer have in the books and in the various places of knowledge, especially in the universities and research institutes. The crystals are therefore the bearings of the records of the history of the planet. We can also look at the crystals from the point of view of embryology. Now, embryologically, when we start our evolution here, we come as a crystalline being. In fact, it can now be scientifically proven that when the sperm and the ovum, meet and interact, the initial formation will always be a crystalline structure. And that crystalline structure, starting from the basic atom, takes the form of the heart, and then later on, the entire genetic code is imprinted in it. And it takes the different forms as limbs, as hair, mouth, etc., etc. We can still find traces of these crystalline structures in our nails, the hardening of the same matrix. We can find it in the bones. So when we want to understand the correlation between us and the planet itself, the bony, nail, and other structures within the human body are the crystalline foundation upon which that system is built. So our beings is a replica of the being herself in which we live and have our being. That is the Earth Mother. So at the core of the Earth Mother, some scientists have been able to measure precisely how these vibrations are occurring and at the various frequencies. They have termed some of that the Schumann resonance, which measures the pulses that are emanating from the Earth's core. So we know of this knowledge also in our own existence coming into being. We take the form of a mineral, which is an expression of the crystalline structure, the mineral, and then we'll mutate into the plant existence, then we get to the animal existence, and then into the human existence. I mean, if you are thinking about it in terms of psychology, that is how our psyche also evolves according to the intellectual, the emotional, and the intuitive and psychic faculties that make up our being. So the crystals therefore holds the records of the planet. I have always said that if we will but look into the crystal beings to learn our history and at least use the material in the university just as a guide, but as not a place to actually look for history, because most of that has been written in the last 400 years by conquerors who have themselves pillaged a lot of the material and pirated and plagiarized it in a form that suits a certain narrative. But if we want the true history, then we have to look into the crystalline world. And the crystals record the history. They contain the entire DNA structure and the beginning of the Earth and its various evolutionary stages up to where we are now. And we can also infer from that same data how far we can go from here. These records have been given so many times in the indigenous knowledge systems. Our indigenous people have recorded them in symbols, and various stories have been left, and different types of signs have been placed in our evolutionary journey as reminders of what we have been, who we are yet to become. When you look at the Mayans, who are our ancestors, direct ancestors, they actually took a physical colony here on Earth in most of Latin America, Mesoamerica, and most of the Central and North American areas, down to our existence here in Africa, prior to the continental drift, and that led to the splitting of the continents. and we would have been the same strain of people across the different continents that we have today. The Mayans were the record keepers. They were the keepers of the time, and they could tell with precision the turning points in the various evolutionary stages of the planet. And with that same information, we could tell where we are in our own journey as individuals. So they had shown by 2012, December 21, of course, the doomsday people were saying that the world was going to end at the time. But the Mayan calendar at the time was actually telling of the turning point in our evolution, where things would take on an entirely different trajectory, mostly in the positive direction, especially coming from the trauma, the pain, the wars, and the various distractions that we have brought on this beautiful paradise that we call planet Earth. They had shown that from 2012, there will be a dramatic shift. That even included a shift in the plates and the poles of the planet. And in some literature, it's now being detected and measured, specifically that the magnetic north of the Earth, as it was about 30 years ago, is no longer in the same place. And some have even predicted now that there's a flip where the north has become the South Pole and the South has become the North Pole. These things are yet to be specifically confirmed by modern science, because we have also reduced ourselves to the level of modern science. Unless modern science confirms what we are saying from the indigenous literature is not taken seriously. But the Mayans had mapped these things up specifically. They had even shown that 8 years, that's the first octave on the musical scale after the 2012, there'll be another turning point. And this turning point, we walk through it without even knowing. And so the indigenous literature, so in some of the crystals that we have in our studies, especially in the Logos library, for instance, you'll find that you can take one of these crystals and hold it in your hand and read the entire history of the planet. You will know the societies that have been here, the cultures, the histories, the technological advancements. So that when today you see touch screens and maybe wireless technologies, internet and things like that, you see that this is a recapitulation of another epoch where we had actually gone way, way beyond what we are doing today and now. So 6G and 5G have become the new buzzwords. But if you've seen what we have accomplished, was our ancestors before now, through the crystals. The crystals was also the basis of our energy and propulsion systems. To build any vehicle and transport or teleport yourself out of this dimension, you need the knowledge and the intelligence of the crystals. So beyond time, that to understand this physical dimension, this 3D matrix that we find ourselves, to know how things are sequenced in days, months, weeks, years, in epochs, in time, minutes, seconds, nanoseconds, etc. The crystals hold that knowledge and that vibration. The crystals, like quartz, for instance, are applied in our watches, because when you hold a quartz crystal in your hand for an extended period and you become present to yourself, you simply drop to the exact frequency and vibration of the Mother Earth. The quartz crystal connects you directly to the root of the mother energy. And in that particular root, when you look at the Schumann's resonance, drops to about 7.83 hertz on the scale. And that is the average beginning of what they study in neuroscience and neuropsychology in terms of brainwave cycles. The alpha wave is around 8 cycles per second. And that is how the brain waves are measured. Sometimes it could be cycles per minute or per second, depends on the time frame correlation that you choose. So you see the exact correlation between the Schumann's resonance that is tracking the extra low frequencies of the Earth's interior core, which is nothing but spikes of electrical charges emitted by the crystalline structure at the ionosphere. And it's these interactions that produces the extra low frequencies. And these extra low frequencies can be harnessed in many ways for many different applications in weather, meteorology, in science, physics, mathematics, etc., etc. But in consciousness studies, it can also be a measure of the rate at which we have also evolved from our mineral state into something else and different. And these resonances can be tracked over time for different cities, places within the city, houses, neighborhoods and jobs. It can be even applied in psychological terms to mental and emotional states. And we can measure these now with modern instruments. And they have shown that as the consciousness of the planet increases, we should see the Schumann's resonance actually also increase. At the last check, this scale was actually calibrated to around 60 thereabout. And some of the predictions are that if humanity can lift their consciousness up to that level, the dark light quotient will be recalibrated and there will be more light than dark. Therefore, we should see all things equal. And this has to happen from the point of view of vibrations, energy, and frequencies, that if we can move into a higher frequency, vibrate higher on that scale, a lot of the trauma that we have accumulated as individuals can easily drop. That's looking at our individual resonance. And so it is that the collective can also experience less pain, less trauma. And it will also be the case that a lot of the domination and control, the dictatorial and undemocratic systems that have been erected specifically to control the masses will also begin to crack up. And we are seeing some of these with, a lot of the disclosures that are happening right now. Globally, we've gone through the contracts that the Vatican has held over and over again and kept secret for a long time about how they run and manage the financial systems. The different traumas that people have gone through in the religious programming that have gone on in the past trillions of years is beginning to surface when these vibrations get into higher order. And that is where we are now, brothers and sisters. It is through the knowledge of these crystals that we'll be able to understand how we can drop the overly reactive parts of our biology and get to the more gentle, feminine aspects, the more intuitive part of us, tapping into the subconscious and manifesting at once whatever we purpose to bring into being. And these crystals, some of them, like citrine, are naturally, by their composition and nature, are wealth attracting. So the intention to tap into the energy of that crystal and create the abundance flow that will help you to manifest whatever that you want to manifest in this physical realm. So it is with other crystals that will get us into the intuitive spot of our heart that we connect. So when you look at the entire electromagnetic spectrum, take the color spectrum, the crystals show up in each of these. So at the base of the energy matrix, you have the infrared, you have different types of crystals that match this precise color and shows our root to the base of ourself. And as you go up the scale, you have different crystals that take the shape of the orangey, the blue, the green, purple, and all the way. What we have as the quartz crystal, the white clear quartz that shows up the crown where the lights come up, and nothing can be hidden anymore from you. Wherever you look, you see where the traps are. Wherever you look, you see where the abundance is. So it becomes very difficult for anybody, therefore, to be able to teach the people that we live in scarcity, that we operate in scarcity economics, when abundance is what we see all around us. It becomes extremely difficult for people to be convinced that there's any paradise outside of what paradise we already exist on, and that the only thing we need to do is to look deep, recognize the opportunities and the brightness all around us, take in the present moment, and help create precisely what we want to manifest. Radio, culture, that teaches us this knowledge. For me, especially as a student of economics and finance, crystals play a very, very vital role in our monetary and our financial system. In fact, all our computers run the same crystal technology. It is almost impossible to be able to build any vehicle, for that matter, without the crystals. And these crystals, like tantalum, like cobalt, are behind the semiconductor technology, transistors, all the revolutions that we see in mobile telephony, televisions, space communications, and so on and so forth. There are other crystals that we are yet to actually come into contact with. Here in Ghana, a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with my younger brother, Kwesi, who is a mineral engineer. And he told me the last time they actually did a serious geological hydrocarbon mapping of our land was way back 1968. And that is official. But there are others sitting somewhere with the exact and geological maps of our country. And they know the exact locations of what kinds of crystals are hidden where. Radio, culture. To visit my mother. And I just saw in my cousin's place, all the houses have been destroyed because they have gone underneath and removed lots of gold. Somebody has seen a stone around, and when they picked it, it was all gold, and they started. It was every house in the area has now been looted from beneath. You're just waiting for a slight shakeup in the interior, and everything comes down. So we have massive amounts of these crystals all around us. Gold is the fundamental basis of our monetary system today. In fact, we now have fiat currencies since the 1970s. But before that, the money system was based on the gold standard. This held on from the aftermath of the Second World War, and even before that. So we used to have the bimetallic system. Gold and silver will be used in different conversion rates as the units of exchange and the mediums of exchange, store of value for that matter. These crystals have been very instrumental in building the financial technology, even including the digital ones. The entire blockchain technology has to run on the crystalline matrix. And it is these lattices that forms the structure that lets information transmit from one end to another. Even in electricity, when you take a gold wire, for instance, and you measure the electrical input from one end to the other, you see that the transmission is exactly the same. So when we use gold in our electrical wire construction, you find more efficiency in the input-output ratio because nothing is lost in the translation, as they say, but in the transmission process. What you put in is exactly what you get. Other crystals like copper, for instance, are very, very good conductors of electricity, but not as efficiently as gold. And because gold has now become more traditionally the basis of our currency, and the many uses, esoteric and more spiritual, that it can be put. The competition for it has rather limited its use in the applications to electricity and other industries. But that would be one of the revolutions that the many entrepreneurs who are working in this area can easily catch on, because a very tiny amount of it can generate so much more, and the rate of transmission remains the same. But we can look at the role of these crystals in the monetary system as the medium of exchange and the store of value. Ever since we started using gold to store value, we've seen that the price of gold has been almost very, very stable for most of the time. When you take the United States dollar at its inception in 1913 up to now, it has lost almost about 93% of its original value. That tells you that we are working with just a mere paper, not money. Gold, on the other hand, in the last 100 years has only vacillated in value about 1 to 3%. And that tells you that if you want to deal with all the things that economists talk about as inflation, as exchange rate volatility, asset plummeting and melting, then we have to return to the original money, which is the basis of the crystals. Once upon a time, salt was much more valued than gold in economic transactions. When you look at the trans-Saharan trade in the Sahel today, from places like Kumbisale, Odagost, Ouagadougou, I used to actually call it Ouagadougou, and then to Salaga, connecting the various routes, trade routes, where commodities of different kinds, opening up of the continent, the interaction between the East and the West, and the North and the South. We traded in commodities, and salt at a certain point was the medium of exchange, medium of transaction. So beyond its alchemical properties of being able to neutralize because of the positive and negative ions, its ability to restore to equilibrium any system that has been disturbed, salt becomes a very vital component of our system as humans. Even the fluid system that is flowing through us, if you look at the lymphatic and other fluids that are going on in our system, they take that quality of salt. So is the seawater. The amniotic fluid that we all floated in our mother's womb is purely made of that substance. And it is this salty nature that makes us who we are, to be able to neutralize any negative situation and turn it into the opposite, and to be able to transmute poisons into, beautiful, beautiful structures. And that has been the story of I and I. So the return to Zion through the crystals and the vibrations of the crystals is really reconnecting back to this ancient knowledge, the stories of our ancestors enshrined in the crystal vehicles that they created that transported them from this dimension into the other dimensions. Our ability to travel from one portal to another and to really ground ourselves here is the story of the crystalline beings that are leading us. So they return to Zion, and to be able to live at that higher vibration energy that pulsates from the very core of Zion requires a clear understanding of the crystal and the crystal beings. Unfortunately for us today, because of the merchants of the temple, commercialized and overly sexualized planet, we have debased the role of these crystals. There are so many stones that are now sold which are synthetic and do not grant the potency that we talk about in original crystals such as amethyst, topaz, tourmaline, lapis lazuli. I discuss some of these that are personally within my neighborhood every time, like citron, which is a very, very powerful wealth evocator. So we are a people of wealth. So anytime we are around, you always find symbols, systems of wealth around. So just surrounding yourself with the citrine crystal. The major part of these citrine crystals too are coming from Madagascar. And interestingly, and that's the beauty of it, because that whole part of the planet and the continent that has torn off like that carried with it some unique features that you don't find in many places, but it also carries unique life. And a visit to there is really always a reconnection back to the crystalline matrix. So you find citrine almost all around. It speaks of abundance, exuberance, wealth, plenty. And that is what we even see in our names, the construction of our names. Most times people say Alagidede, but it's Alagidede. Alagidede is just an expression of abundance. Abundance is what flows around. And when you say Alagidede, that means you have abundance. It's a confirmation of what you have. This is not a scarcity mentality. It's a scarcity mentality goes with competition all the time. Abundance mentality goes with cooperation, co-creation, oneness. That's what we say, I and I. And so connecting back to the crystalline matrix, the root of Zion, that's where when the lion really roars, others will have to pay attention. We are the apex predators in saying this, because when you look at our coat of arms, we have the lion there. We still have two eagles, two bald eagles on opposite sides of the coat of arms. But we are being preyed upon every now and then. This is the richest gold mine in Africa. The country in general, from north to south, east to west. But in the books, they say it's still one of the most indebted countries on the continent. How do you reconcile this? So when we say reconciling the thesis with the antithesis, we mean we've got to find a balance between these two dichotomies. And the balance is there because we know that we can, if we invoke the Hermetic principles. Our great ancestor Jehuti taught us about how to balance the opposites, feminine, masculine, of the in and out. And that is by dropping the brainwave frequencies to that very point where the Schumann resonance reads 7.83. And that's where the alpha brainwave starts. See, you enter into that state of almost dreamlike, sleepy but not sleepy, awake but aware. Tapping into the music of the spheres, you begin to hear differently, different sounds, vibrating, higher, rates. And there you drop further and you begin to have an intention and you pay attention to a specific thing. That's where the creation starts. So the crystals can be the portal for that entry back into the place where everything remains serene and quiet, where I and I knows without question, where you understand and overstand, as some of our brothers would say. So this is the invitation. Whether we look at the monetary system that we operate, we are the people with the abundance of it all over the planet, all over our galaxy. Others have heard about it and they've come here, enslaved us, and we've allowed it to happen. But waking to the call of the crystals is to revert that particular relationship. And that's what our young brothers and sons in the Sahel have shown, that if we can only but seize the monetary values that we have, and that everything remains here and we decide what we want to do with it, the richest gold vein is passing through the entire Sahel, and most of it is concentrated, this small portal that we call Ghana. So are the numerous minerals. But as the country exhibits this type of total leakage of its vital energy. The merchants of the temple and the pigs, there is very little left. And the call of the crystals is that we return back to their knowledge. So that not the destructive ways we are mining currently, because gold has been mined here in trillions of years, not through the kind of destructive technologies that we have brought today. There are stories of different crystals and metals that have been left as repositories of knowledge, wealth by our ancestors that are waiting for our return to claim them. Many a times we think that these greener pastures that they talk about, the acres of diamonds, are outside of where we are, but they are all here. So we journey far to only discover that all the wealth is locked right in the very vaults and rooms which we sleep and wake up every day. And so the call to I and I through this crystal vibrations, the crystal energy, is to tap into this music, because the crystals also give us the portal into the musical world. When you look at the vibrations of music, the 432 hertz will also drop our brainwave cycle to the alpha level. And certain specific musical notes, when they are hit, they connect us straight to the alpha brainwave. And we can even drop deeper and deeper. And that's where we begin to tap into the knowledge, the intelligence of the elemental beings behind all the crystals, and how the crystals are connected with the plant kingdom, and how the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom interfaces, and how the plant kingdom and the human kingdom works out. And so we see what we call dependent origination, that everything else is dependent on everything else. So when we talk about general equilibrium in economics, we always mean that all systems, all markets, places are simultaneously connected. So that if you can establish equilibrium in one, then by implication, through the resonance, you can establish the same equilibrium in all. And that comes to holding on to our core and staying to our core vibrations. So brothers and sisters, friends and loved ones, I have been talking for some time. I would like to take a pause here and invite you to the reasoning table. I give thanks.
Radio, culture.
Rastafari. Yes, we give thanks, Prof. Imhotep, for taking us, teleporting our minds through realms on the subject of crystal vibrations. I trust many of us have heard a lot, may have questions or comments for some clarity. So at this time, I'll invite anybody who has a question or comment to do so. I'll recommend that if you have a question, please, you can raise your hand. We will grant you the floor to ask the question. Yeah.
Radio, culture.
Show by hands who want to ask a question or pass a comment, and then you can be allowed in. So whilst we wait for questions, maybe I don't know, Prof, I can ask the first question. Please, Prof, is there a relationship between the crystals and the Schumann resonance? I'm asking because there are some people who have made these connections in other studies, and I want to see how the link is established, please. Whilst others prepare to ask their questions, Prof, please, this is one question I want you to throw more light on. Thank you.
Okay, right. So I mentioned the Schumann resonance very briefly. I didn't have much time to discuss it in detail. But normally it is the very low frequency electromagnetic resonance that is recorded at the Earth's atmosphere. So the way they measure this is to look at the Earth's cavity. So this Earth has always been hollow, we know that. It is modern science that is trying to now come to that point about hollow Earth, but they have written it out and debated several times that, hollow Earth doesn't exist, and so many other things. But we know that the Earth has a cavity, and at this cavity, there are electrical impulses that are coming out, and that is where the crystal structure begins, because the molten formations are at that core. And as they emit these low electromagnetic frequencies in the cavity, the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, when you look at that surface, the layer of the atmosphere around about 50 to 100 kilometers above the surface, you find this activity very, very common. So these resonances are sometimes caused by lightning strikes, okay? And there can also be some electromagnetic discharges in the atmosphere. And they will normally create some standing waves that oscillate at specific frequencies. So scientists have been able to measure that. I mean, one of the German scientists called physicist Winfried Otto Schumann, actually it's his name that they put behind the instrument and the measure. He was able to work out the mathematical equations to bring us to that 7.83 hertz as the base Schumann's resonance recorded by these lightning strikes at the Earth's interior core. So that is the Schumann's resonance. Normally, as I said, if the Schumann's resonance is rising, it also tells us that the rate of consciousness in those that are the spiritual community have interpreted it to mean that the consciousness of the planet is also rising, increasing. So when you look at the time of the world wars and all the cataclysms that we have gone through, to the Cold Wars up to the 90s, we've seen the Earth, Schumann's resonance rising, actually from 9 to about 9.9 from 1987 to 97, that decade. You also see that that slow rise was also one of the most difficult part of our history, economically, globally also. And then between actually 97, that short period to about 2012, there was 13 hertz recorded on the Schumann's resonance. That also signified the end of the Mayan calendar around that time. And this 13 hertz that was recorded, some have interpreted it as the 13 crystal spores that was given by the indigenous, the ancient people to the indigenous of the planet. So if the Schumann's resonance reaches a higher pitch, we expect that the consciousness of the planet may change for the better, that is if it's high, and for the worse if it's dropped. That is one part of the interpretation, but it depends on what field you are. Those who are dealing with weather events and climatic changes are using this Schumann resonance, charges to measure, what is happening in terms of global warming. What can we do in our reality? So that's in brief. That's what it is. We can explore this, in other dimensions, but briefly, that's what the Schumann's resonance is all about.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Radio culture.
Does anybody have a question, contribution?
I think there's a hand up by our brother Opon Wadie.
Ras, Prof. Will, please call me.
Rastafari, so Rastafari is here, but this is his wife, the son, Upon and I would like to thank you for this really beautiful presentation. I am a purveyor of crystals, and so I have a million questions, but some real key ones that I just want to ask right now. I'll ask two. The first one is what you said about the clear quartz, and it's really painful to have to learn this stuff through Europeans because, like you said, their information is really a guide and not it's not the summation of this information. So, you know, they will say to you that if you have a piece of clear quartz, you really can direct it to act as any other crystal would, because it is a mother quartz. And I heard you referring to that. But my question is, like, when we see mathematical implements like the Ishango bone, that was found in the southern hemisphere of Africa. The Ishango bone, of course, was a mathematical measurement tool, and I hope that I don't have to over-explain because you know everybody already knows what that is. But yeah, a mathematical tool with certain etchings on it that suggested it was used to keep tally of something, maybe of multiple things. But at the top of that bone was a piece of clear quartz rammed into the bone. And of course, Europeans cannot explain it. So the bone is believed to be the femur of like a baboon or something like this. But at the top of the bone, this clear quartz is inserted. And the same clear quartz was found in the formation of the pyramids, and in the building construction of the pyramids. And so I just want you to elaborate a little bit more on clear quartz. Like, give us just a little bit more language. Like, first of all, why would ancient people do that? What was, and we do believe it was a female tool. I deeply believe that it was a female tool for menstruation and other things. But that clear quartz being put there, what was that? And then my second question is, like, when you see their majesties, particularly Empress Menen, you'll see her a lot of times with a brooch right out front on her clothes that has two circles. And we know that the brooch is now no longer in the possession of the royal family, that it is somewhere else. Someone else has hold of it, and believed to have gotten hold of it when they had to escape and, you know, go to Europe. But that the crystals that were in it were aquamarine and emerald. And just any highlights that you could give about why a queen would choose those two. And of course, those are very feminine stones, but all the stones are. And any insight you could provide on why you think she might have done that?
Thank you, my sister. Culture. This contributes to the reasoning, because I think your dealings with crystals themselves speak volumes about what you've just transmitted, which has added other layers to the discussion that we've just had. And that's the beauty of this reasoning, because it brings other perspectives that we can always enlarge on. With the clear quartz, all that you've said, it's just on point. It is exactly it. These are mother stones also. So when you look at our history, as we have known in the indigenous studies, this planet was seeded by women. And so when these women descended here, they brought with them certain sacred knowledge. Most of it today we can only glean from the crystals. So any question we really want to ask about, any concept we want to dig into, it is the crystalline structure of this clear quartz that give us the intuition and the doorway that could lead us there. So when you look at the bond and even the atomic structure of it, scientifically speaking, you can explain this very easily, because it's just function exactly like how diamonds are formed. Because if you look at the layers of the clear quartz, most often when you hold it, you don't see it. But when you focus on it for a long time, and very often you have to be careful, because especially when you are out, it's going to contact the body's electrical field very, very strongly. And when that happens, what it does is that it activates the neurons and actually helps them to fire and wire far more effectively than without it. So that's just holding this clear quartz in your hand. And so what it does is that it's going to reorganize your entire body matrix, and you're going to get into that feminine feel. Because at the parasympathetic, that is when we step out of our fight or flight mode and just drop. And that's what also, in terms of what I explained about the resonance scale, that drop also mimics the drop of the brainwave cycles. So if you want to be more scientific about it, at the brain, what is happening, especially at the optical, level here in the forehead, the brain cells and connections here are going to give you much more activity than before. That's just the action of the crystal that you are holding. And that activates also the entire nerve system that is connected, 12 of them according to our modern science, in the cranium. And the 10th one, that's the vagus nerve. When you stimulate it, they are dropping the brain waves, it actually connects to all the internal organs, from the heart, the liver, the kidneys. So you can basically exercise, reawaken, re-engineer, re-energize, and revivify the entire human dynamic from this inside out. So when you also take the bonding of this, because you will find that it will give you a kind of a tetrahedral type of formation, similar to the diamonds, but not quite. So when you hold some of the crystals that have been shaped, you can see the formations and the forms that they take. Very beautiful, designs and expressions that come through them. But that is very important for one thing in terms of the esoterics of it, because you have the activation of both the negative and the positive axis of the brain, the feminine and the masculine, energies within. And that, again, will create the necessary balance in the human system that will foster creation, creativity, and the rest. So we know when our great mothers visited here and seeded this planet, they carried with them certain specific crystals. And quartz was the key crystal for almost keeping the stories, because they couldn't keep them in books. Imagine if we were recording the history in books. When the Alexandria Library was planned and into fire and ransacked in around 642 or so AD, they took almost all the books that was written by our ancestors, pillaged and plagiarized them, until, the guides of the sacred knowledge took them into the Pathologos Library, where they have hidden some of them. So the psychology of it, the anatomy, and all of the connections of the crystal matrix to the objects you talked about are all connected in one way or the other. So it is almost the commonest crystal that we also find around. So they use it. Our ancients have this principle that for you to be able to, make commerce, you must find the items that exist in greater quantities, not in limited quantities, so that you can replicate, because they were not thinking about scarcity and limitation. So it has to be in abundance for you to be able to use it in your trade and in your other activities. So spiritually, there are connections to water deities, to mermaids, and the divine feminine that evokes the quartz, clear quartz attributes that are in us. And when you are actually a being that is wired to this, you see that honesty and self-expression becomes part of it. It's just your matrix you express. because it's an equilibrium state. You don't need to be anything that you are not. Speaking your mind and speaking your truth becomes very easy. Artistic expressions, these are all feminine expressions and qualities that we all have as masculine. But many times we have allowed the masculine nature to dominate. And that is part of the message of the quartz crystal, the clear quartz especially, as the holder of the ancient wisdom and as the purveyor of the dream time creations that we have. To remind us that in this sacred moment that we connect to listen and to reason together, all emotional grief or baggage can be neutralized in holding this. So the ancient sailors will carry it as a talisman for safe travel, but because they know when you hold it and you are calm, it can also calm the storms around you. So if you can calm the internal storm, you can also bring down the external storm. So it is said that when the disciples were battered left, right, and center, and they woke the teacher, he just said, "Be still." That is the power of the clear quartz. Still the waters. Still the monkey mind. So this is also the position of power, confidence, and bravery, helping you to speak truth. So it shields you against any negative energy. When it is around you, as I discussed about the ionic crystals like salt, it neutralizes. So the quartz crystal, the clear quartz, will neutralize any negative energy, especially if it's a psychic attack. So if you know how to deploy them, how to calm yourself, how to hold them with reverence, and how to, nurture and care, because crystals, after a certain point, they need to be charged and recharged, especially around certain, astrological alignments and moon phases. We need to recharge these. And in many places, when you put them for a long time, especially because the quartz, clear quartz, can store energy, it can actually store all kinds of the toxicities in the area. So every now and then you need to clear this. You need to purify. You need to, just like we take a shower and clear our bodies, our systems daily. So my sister, there is lots more that we can talk about clear quartz, but it talks about clarity, purposefulness, vision, mind, and you speak with clarity, with power. And when the feminine energy is finally awake, this is what it does. It awakens us to our truth. And that is where the voice, so the thyroid gland is one area that this quartz can work on, the throat and the entire immune system. So typically, if you are wired to it, inflammations and allergies are things that you can easily use it to clear. So in the medical field, it also has a lot of applications. In fact, most of our medical instruments work through, the needles, the pointed needles that they insert in our various healing, especially in the alternative health industry, like acupuncture needles, certain types of surgical tools. When clear quartz is fixed into them, they amplify the vibrations and the energies and make, surgery quite more easy. So there is so much about clear quartz. You also mentioned aquamarine. I just said a few words, but in the adornment industry, I mean, this is one of the massive, crystals that we are. So seawater is typically what the aquamarine is. It's just exactly what the name is, seawater. So what is seawater? Especially when your birthstone is this part of, stone. So when the moment water comes into mind, we are talking about life at its very core. Our African ancestors always say, water is life. When water comes right now, there's nothing you cannot create. All ancient civilizations have their major breakthroughs around water. So water, so aquamarine, is this type of stone is the sea itself, is the marine environment itself in a stony form. So I have sunflowers here. If you actually want to see the sun in a plant form, then it's the sunflower. If you want to see the sea in stone form, in crystal form that you can hold, then it is the aquamarine. So traditionally, this it's a stone that when it combines what we call combination therapy in crystal healing, is that you can combine it with stones like the moonstone or selenite, and you see you can enhance and amplify your intuition by 1,000 volts energy. So under the full moon, for instance, the energies of this are also amplified because you also know the movements of the moon and the effects on the tidal waves in the ocean. And these are all feminine expressions. The moon is typically a feminine energy. Water is also one of the feminine, elements that we have. The feminine elements of air and water. So that's the aquamarine. So these two powerful, actually, earthy and watery stones are the foundations upon which our planet was constructed. It is these very stones that lay the building blocks of what we have today as planet Earth. And that's why they are in abundance everywhere you go. We can decide to use them also as money because they can store value for a long, long time. So this would be my brief response, my great sister, and thank you very much for those very, very penetrating contributions and comments.
Prof, please.
Yes.
She asked for the meaning of the gems that the Empress was wearing. You have something to say about that as well?
Empress Makeda?
Empress Menem. She mentioned some particular gems that she had. Empress Lasantua.
Yeah, so it was the aquamarine and emerald.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the aquamarine, I feel that. I feel
dealt with that.
Yeah.
For that information, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know if you have any ideas around emerald though.
Yeah. So you see that Empress Menem actually was not associated with one particular kind of crystal, although emerald appeared to be the commonest thing that we see in some of the later depictions. But very often you also find hair with the clear quartz as well. It's a rose quartz, especially because she exudes that of love. And then we have different types of other stones that she used in her expression. And this is the typical feminine structure that we are talking about and discussing. In terms of her particular use of emeralds, I do not have much information about that. But if you look at just what emeralds stand for, these are, the radiant, stones. If you look at their green radiance, wisdom, divine royalty. So this is the aura of the Ethiopian system. So to show physically what that royalty of this empress is, you need a physical vehicle, and the emeralds are the typical depiction of divine wisdom and royalty. So you always find this not just in the Ethiopian court, but many of the indigenous courts. But our great empress exuded this type in greater excess that got the world's attention. So when you put that radiance of green, the green itself is the color of the earth. That is the earth mother. When water comes right now, you see everything popping up in green radiance. So it's also at the heart of everything. So when you look at the color of the energy center of the heart, that is where we look at. So Empress Menem Ashfal, the revered, queen consort of Emperor Haile Selassie, put these around her. And that alone, so there are certain women, and especially it is talked of our great empress, that just their physical appearance alone depicts the soul behind that. And for you to see how mighty, how giant this is, the crystals convey that vibration. And emerald is the vehicle that amplifies this around the queen. And so you will see that almost all the time around her, and it is that connection to the crystal world. These jewels that we talk about in the royal courts are also all adorned with these green stones of emeralds or green jade. So jade will also typically be expressing around that. And jade, when you find jade, you also find emerald most of the time. So this greenness is our connection to, again, the feminine energy and the power that it exudes. So at this stage, it is also the clarion call of the emeralds and the other crystals that their time again is up. That we must heed to the beauty that they exude, the power and the mystery that they bring, the force and the vital unity that they create around royals. And we are royals. We don't all have to be kings and queens, but we are kings and queens in our own right. So anytime as a female you feel your royalty, your empress has come to life, these are the stones that will convey that. And the brothers notice this vibration immediately because it's very, very evocative and it speaks volumes without uttering the word. So my great sister, that will be my little contribution to this part of the question. Thank you very much.
Your thing.
Yes, sir.
Radio culture.
Dr. Sadia, no. Please, your hands is raised up. You can ask your question now, please.
Okay, Rastafari. I want to give thanks to Prof for taking the time to teach us his great information. My knowledge on crystals is very, very limited. I really don't know much. I'm just beginning to explore that field. Through the lectures, Prof, my basic knowledge or what I'm really learning about now is salt. So since you mentioned the salt, I just wanted to ask if you think there are any, the differences of the different salts we have, like the Himalayan salt, like the pink salt versus the basic ones we use. Are they is one superior to the other? And I know, you said that salt can be used to expel negative vibrations or something like that. Can it also do the opposite? Basically, this is what I'm trying to learn right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Radio culture.
Question. The idea of salt that you brought up has really evoked a lot of feelings also in me, and thank you for bringing that up, because the types of salt matter, and it's not just salt. These days, because of what has been going on as iodine deficiency and all the science over the past 30 or so years, there's a new kind of salt in the market that is supposed to have iodine in it. We have done a lot of these tests in the food labs and food technology labs, and we have found that some of these are just basic, artificial compounds that are being fed to the humans. Unfortunately, that type of salt is not what I'm talking about. So it doesn't carry the sacred vibrations and the sacred voltage of regular sea salt, which is a salt for cleansing and protection. So very often when you see that you have, in my case, almost about a month or so, I want to go to Accra, even though the water is very polluted, just to dip myself in the sea. It's just a free spa treatment. It detoxifies you of all the build-up negative charges around and all the fumes that we consume here in a dense and very, very dirty city like Accra. And it's also the case that our normal, regular life just gets us worn out. So depend yourself once in a while in the sea if you are close to the beach, because this is free, Mother Nature. Today, the sea is no longer free because they are caging everywhere. But you'll still find to pay like 20 or 30 cedis to get in and dip yourself and come out. It is much cheaper than going to a regular hotel spa treatment that will not touch all the components. There's also the pink salt, which comes from the Himalaya mountains. It's been very commercialized in many ways. And I know that people are presenting all kinds of things as Himalaya salt. So really, when it comes to salt, again, you have to look deeply, hold it, test it, feel the vibrations before you purchase. So a lot of the commercial things that they are selling in the health and wellness and spirituality literature, most of them cannot really be fully verified as the serious salt. But the original Himalayan salt, which is pink, comes from the Himalaya mountains. That place is a very high energy, high vibration spot. So the crystals that are coming from there carry the same energy. And that's why the fascination with their use in energy amplification, in love rituals, in drawing good energy around you. Then we can also have black salt, which is salt made with ash or charcoal. You can use it for banishing, negative things, reversing cases, so on and so forth. The Epsom salt has also been one of the ones that is available. Some use it for spiritual detox, relaxation, and so on and so forth. So in terms of salt, to your question, therefore, we have different varieties of them. And my little take on this is that when you using salt, please scrutinize. Here in Ghana, in most of what people put in their food is not really salt, at least to the best of my knowledge. And in the few places that I have stayed and lived, especially in the large-scale conglomerate supermarkets, where people just take all these compounds they don't read and put a little bit of salt, and the entire package is just stuffed with some white substance that they put into their soups and foods. So we need to check. For spiritual purposes, sea salt, definitely Himalaya, but also we have in our African conditions. I remember my grandmother used to like this very black salt coming from Taboya, and there's the Taboya salt. Sometimes it can have even sand in it. My grandmother never ate any of the iodinated salt. She didn't like their taste, didn't like any of it. So anytime we cook, when I have picked up that quality, in my house, I still use the very hard, big crystals. And you have to know, because everything local, you have to be attentive. You have to calculate how much you need to put in so that we don't put too much in your soup. So the types matter for spiritual purposes, for alchemical, infestations. There are a lot of rituals of salt, sugar, and cinnamon mixtures to attract wealth, but people have all of these kinds of things. But it really comes down to what you believe be the medium through which you want to manifest what you want to. So some will use it to conjure. Some will be gazing at, crystal bowls of salt water to, see visions. Some use it to enhance, dream magic, for instance. So placing salt under your pillow it may prevent some nightmares because it neutralizes all those negative charges around. And some can use this same salt to do all kinds of interpretations of, patterns and pathologies. So salt is a very, very large field that we can, look at beyond the other uses that I have also mentioned. In most of the Japanese shio or what they call salt rituals. Some of the sumo wrestlers will throw the salt before matches to purify the ring. And then in some places where they understand the mysteries behind salt, in some restaurants, for instance, they'll place salt piles at entrances, ward off bad luck. In some of the Jewish traditions, you find salt covenants. In the book of Numbers, for instance, Numbers 18 and the 19th verse thereabout, the eternal promise of the salt covenant. And also you learned about the Lot's wife scenario where she turned into a pillar of salt. These were allegories for something much more than what we can discuss here. So for divination purposes, for psychic work, salt is really very important in many, many dimensions. And alchemists understand the three things that you need to bring about any alchemical manifestation. It's the salt, sulfur, and the silver. And these are also in mercury at times also. It's mimicking the different existences, the soul, the spirit, and the physical vehicles that we pervade. So salt really is an exemplar of the multidimensional, unseen patterns that we observe in the atomic and molecular structures that science has so far given to us. So thank you very much for your question. That's what I can say for now. This.
Thank you. Culture. This was quiet. I was trying to throw in my thought.
Yes.
Okay. So, Prof, cowries, do you consider them to be crystals?
Very, very, very interesting question. What do you think?
Well, from the submission you gave, that's what brought the question to my mind. And I would think so as well. I was even thinking about the teeth. It was just the way you were explaining, what crystals are. I was thinking the cowries, the teeth, even the skull could be some aspects of crystal. That's my thought, but I don't know.
Precisely, you got it. So we are on the same page. If you look at my definition of crystal, it's a very expansive definition from just the appearance of lattices. It's a specific geometric pattern or form. So those who put cowrie shells of different types, those we use for money and the rest. We have the monetaria moneta. It's the cowrie shell that we use for money. In Ghana, we call the cedi. Actually, our cedi takes its name from the cowrie shell. So yes, these are crystals that have been used for centuries in spiritual practices as currencies for transacting goods and services. They have been known for their mystical and magical properties. So in ancient Asia and Africa especially, and also in the Pacific, these are still known today. In fact, in some of our indigenous traditions, when you are still giving the dowry, what they consider as money is not our modern day cedi paper or dollar paper. It is cowrie shells. As I'm talking, I just reminded of Things Fall Apart when Okonkwo had committed a crime and he had left, and his friend had to send him the wealth that he has accumulated through Okonkwo's investment. It was a pack of cowrie shells. They said that he received them, was counting. That was wealth. That type of currency, we were dominant. You see, today what we use as currency, when the control and domination system wanted to do what they have done, they looked at the objects that were used as indigenous currencies and saw that they didn't have them. So if they don't have them and they use them as currencies, what happens? They can't control. So if you look at the global distribution of cowrie shells, for instance, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific has the major concentration of these. And so when we talk about wealth, it was wealth in cowrie. How many cowrie shells do you have? And you can also, so beyond money, and today we still have them. In fact, I always buy cowrie shells and keep them around. They remind me of symbol of wealth, of money, of abundance. Occasionally, just throw them around. Keep them in your wallet and keep them in your money places. That is the real money. We shall return at one point, I don't know what time in our reality, back to the ancient forms of money, and cowrie shells, gold, salt, silver, and other commodities play a very key role in that. Beyond money, the feminine energy, fertility, is the salty energy that we talk about. So if you even look at the shape of the vulva of the feminine reproductive system, shape is associated with the goddess worship of Yamaya, Lakshmi, Venus. So these are the feminine energies in the in our planet, and that is also the energy, the rising now, because the awakening is all about this time that we are in. Is the feminine power that is coming into being. So when salt crystals are worn as amulets, also cowrie shells like that are worn as amulets, they tend to, protect us against the evil eye, as they say. So you can pair them with other kinds of crystals to amplify their energy. If you have certain types of cowrie shells with citrine, already you have a wealth magnet, abundance, ancient trade, and now pyrite for business success to enhance the cowrie when it's drawing ability. And lapis lazuli can also boost divination, sharpen the cowrie shells reading. So when you go to the divination readings of some of our traditions, the cowrie shells is actually the medium through which the spirit conveys the message to the diviner, and then he interprets it through whether they are open up or facing down. And then the cowrie shell, when you look at the configurations, the one we use for money, the part that is smiling and facing upwards is showing us the feminine side. That's the womb of creation. And then the other side is showing us the masculine side. So you have in that same object, that small, tiny object, the entire knowledge of finance, of money, of technology that is locked in that tiny cowrie shell. So, well, you can
Radio culture.
Crystals. Black tourmaline, for instance, will give you protection. And back to your other question, if we can use salt for good, can we use it for bad? Yes, you can. Everything depends on the intention of the operator. So these shells are crystals in their own right. And crystals, by the geometric description, can form into different types of shapes and patterns. So use them for, learn about it. I'm still also in school learning about these things. So this reasoning always makes it possible to, open up to other dimensions that I had not seen before. I give thanks.
Radio culture.
Give thanks, Prof.
Thanks. Oh,
Prof. Will.
yes, I am.
Yes, please. Your question.
Give thanks, Professor Imhotep, for such mighty reasonings. I'm glad, to hear the questions being asked as well. But I also want to ask if you can touch a little bit on something. So, like traveling throughout Ghana in particular, I have noticed that, some of the places that are known to be very ancient spiritual centers, which are most often in like mountainous areas. I mean, I'm thinking of places such as Tongo, such as Tanobwase and stuff like that. And given your definition of crystal and the fact that one of the things that, when you go to these places, you're going to hear is that those places, the environment is already spiritually charged, so to speak, right? And that the ancestors came over there to meet the place like that. They discovered these places like that. So, in terms of the definition that you've given of what a crystal is it at all within the explanation possible that the charge that has been alluded to in these places is a result of certain crystal elements that exist in these environments? Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother. That's a very loaded question. It will take us like billions of PhDs to unpack it. But very briefly, yes. If you look at the mountain structures, the sacred points, the ley lines, and the various structures in our country today, if we don't even go far and look at Ghana, when you have climbed to Mountain Afajato, you know that you are in a place. The entire rock formation that we see in the outside is very different than what is inside. When you are drilling a borehole, you normally see this as the different formations come. So you may have trillions of different rock formations and crystal structures that are built into that. A couple of weeks ago, we were at the grotto, the Techima. And this is one of the things about the Catholics. Anywhere you find a Catholic grotto, there is a very, very huge mountainous structure.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost impossible to see a Catholic grotto without that type of structure. I myself have actually spent part of my life, this life, as a monk, even though I have married and have children, but I have spent life as a monk in a monastery in Crystal Boise. Over there, when you step out in the night, then you really see that there is power and majesty. When you see the arch-like formation of those, rocks, crystalline formats, you don't need somebody to convince you that there is a God, there's a superior intelligence, and people who didn't have that kind of encounter needed something like that to be written in a book, and then they need to sit in a room to be told about. But you see, when you are out there in nature, at the grotto, the rock formation has actually created a small valley where water collects, and that water, people go there to collect it. Those women who cannot have babies are giving birth, those who want wealth, those who want to travel. This is what the people have enshrined in that place as an energy portal. So every year around major events, you see all kinds of things taking place. So 100% what you have said is true to point. Beyond, you see the Kwawu mountain range, the same range of fold mountains that lead to the folding. Yes, at specific points, our ancestors will say Nana Bruku is there. So when during Easter you see the descent in the place, it's not just for Easter fun and going to the waterfalls. And those who know and understand come there to renew, to refresh, to refuel, to recharge, to reconnect. It's the same when you climb up to the mountains in the Buri. Even when you are climbing, you see water shine out of the rocks. This is the formation of our rivers.
True.
Yamaya and Oshun. It's the same. So the mountains is where all the rivers that are polluted, like the Odo, like the Densu, and then when you catch them at the point where the mountain begins, these are the freshest of waters. The pH of those waters is about the normal 7 or 6.8 that we have been taking. And in fact, a chemicalized one for that matter. Back up in the Eburi Mountains, various places, when you catch the beginning of that headwaters and you taste it, your entire energy matrix will reorganize. So those who know, there are sacred groups that you cannot enter. By the nature of that formation, you will not even be able to penetrate there just by yourself. When we were back in the tunnel formation and the tunnel was Bonomanso and all those, there was a reason why our ancestors, when they landed, they set that as their base. The moment they began to leave that place, they disrupted the base. And that's where almost all our sacred vortices are now Catholic Plutos. So most of our sacred groups really do not have any power. Most of the chiefs do not have any power anymore because they don't even know where the sacred groups are. When you go to Tongo and you see in the Tallinn Sea formation, I mean, the way the rock pedestals themselves have placed themselves, physically speaking, it holds power, presence.
Absolutely.
And our great deity Tongo, when you invoke that and you understand as a child of the land, you understand that this rock formation is the home and the dwelling place of the majestic Tongo. That works. So these are the things that the Catholics are using today in the Vatican. The election of the Pope was all a sacred ritual. All the adornments and everything. These are all sacred rituals that have been termed as pagan. If you enter the Sistine Chapel and you see the patterns that emerge, these are the crystalline formations that have been brought together from the different places. Well, actually, when the colonialists were looting, they were more interested in the sacred knowledge, because if you can control those sacred knowledge, you can control the people and everything around it. So at the grotto, you see all the monuments are painted white in the land that don't have people. And you see all of these images that is telling us a different story. But the people who know, who connect back to those places, connect back to the earth matrix. They are ley lines connecting different planetary grids. There we can know how to tap into the energy grid, the intersection of various energy points. That's why we are suffering to produce basic electricity. We don't know the ley lines. When we created a vortex under the Volta River, we saw how much power it can give. But the ley lines on the mountain tops, on the various places, can be a portal for harnessing the energy. We don't need all of this very dirty, expensive, and inequitable energy structure that we are operating today. So, my brother, these are also stargates. They are portals, but if you know what to do with them, you will always honor the energy that is there. So in our ancestors, they planned the Alagidede around certain specific places and portals. If you go to some of the sacred points and groves, they are still there, but their potency has actually gone down. So you can also look at the planet generally. If you are in Cape Town and you go to Table Mountain, nobody will tell you that this is a giant of giants that is seated at the coast. And she creates a bowl, we call it the city bowl. And you can look at the entire city from above. And just the formation of the Table Mountain, you see when they take you through, they'll tell you the 12 apostles. You see human structures that are standing up as mountains. You see animal formations that are standing up. And as you transition and go deeper, you see the connection of this to precise energy points above us. And that's how the Giza Plateau was created, with the same crystals at the top and mirroring what is beneath and above. So we have all of these structures. Mount Shasta in Northern California is one of the biggest energy points that you will find. You also find this in Stonehenge in England. You find Teotihuacan in Mexico, Mount Kailash in Tibet, the Uluru in Australia, and then in Angkor Wat, you find all of these. So the Purabador, they wouldn't have put it in any other place other than where the dragon energies are flowing. So we need to study more. In fact, if you're in the US, places like Sedona, you know, it's very noted for all kinds of spiritual, meetings, and the cathedral rock, the bell rock. It's a vortex for something. The high iron oxide plus quartz deposits has created this huge vortex that attracts and it enhances and amplifies spiritual, attainments. So if you are there, naturally you just meditate. If you are there, you can't even think of anything that will be, it is ease, and your psychic abilities are amplified. So it is with Machu Picchu. This was the spiritual astrological observatory of the Inca people, who are our ancestors. This is built on a high quartz-rich granite stone. So it's a portal if you go there. And so it is. So this is what I can say for now on this. Thank you very much for that very important question too.
Well, give thanks for that.
Yeah.
Brilliant answer. I just want to add to like the same thing with like Matopo Hills in Zimbabwe, So give thanks.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Radio culture.
Yes, we have Ja, beloved.
Yes, my Lord.
I don't know whether
Yes,
you can
bro.
see the hands.
I can see you. I don't know if everybody can hear me.
Yes, Ras, we can.
All right. We give thanks. Prof, brilliant submission. Brilliant presentation. I have a question and then one that just popped up in my mind just from your last submission. So that's not the main question, but if you can throw that in for me, that would be great. I'll start with the small one. You referred to the Inca people as our ancestors. What exactly does that mean? Are the Inca people the ancestors of the African people? Is that what that means? Are they like the ancestors of the human race? If you could please throw a little bit light on that for me, that would be great. But my main question is this. Speaking of crystals.
Yes.
Speaking of crystals, right? And from your definition, from the brilliant presentation that you gave, I see Ghana is endowed with all different, types of crystals and all of that. And we've mentioned the diamonds at Akwetia and all of that. Recently, we heard about lithium. I don't know if lithium will qualify, but
Yes.
All right. So the main question is this: why is it that our royalty seem over-fixated on gold? Because if you check, is it something that was planted in our mind? Because we say Gold Coast and everything seems to be about gold, even though Ghana has diamonds, or maybe because you said our diamonds are industrial grade, maybe that's the reason, I don't know. But why is it that we have all this range of crystals at our disposal, but there's a fixation on gold? Thank you. Give thanks.
Radio culture.
Thank you very much for this great submission. The pre-Inca civilization is tied to the Olmecans, and the Olmecans, what they call now Mesoamerica, built their civilizations around 1200 to 400 before the Common Era. If you actually look around that time, even before that, see, we had just one land mass. So we go back to the ancient history, and that's why this reasoning is very important, because we are not looking at the history that is recorded in books. We are also not looking at just the history that was given to us by Europeans. And even the indigenous people, because a lot of their most gifted historians were extinguished by force, because if they carry the memory, the people will know who they are. So there was a deliberate attempt to extinguish all the great indigenous historians, so that our civilization and our history, true history, has been truncated in many ways. So when I speak of the Inca, the Olmec. I speak of Africa. I speak of Africans. The closest in the literature that you can find is the work of the great scholar, now our great ancestor, Professor Ivan van Sertima's work on They Came Before Columbus. There he traces all the settlements of various indigenous people, and he destroyed the myth that Black people got into the New World only through contact with Europeans and the slave trade. So in that book, which I highly recommend, and the references therein, and other books that speak of the African origins in the Olmecs, if you still look at our ancestors in the Sahel and look at the images of the Olmecs, the pre-Inca, because we didn't have much information about the Incas, you see that it's the exact continuation of these. They have left monuments for us to see in colossal stone heads with broad nose and full lips. These are semblance of our African and West African features. But if you are in my hometown, you'll find human beings with this kind of broad lips and great, powerful, nose protruding. These are our people. You find the formation of the hair, and what today we can even twist into locks. These are the Inca, Olmec, African people. So we have had that. If you also look in the case of Van Sertima's work, he had actually given about 12 different signs and symbols that you can use to decode the parallels that we find, whether from geography, iconography, religious symbolism, etc., etc. There are similarities with us in our pyramid buildings. Until today, the largest pyramid is actually not in Giza. It's in Mesoamerica. It was built by us. So the Inca influence emerged much at around the 13th, 16th centuries in the Andes. And some have indicated that they were very far from the Olmecs. However, we can look at the traces over the millennia, especially with the records that have been bastardized by the cataclysms that we went through as a people. So we can see pre-Columbian African voyages, some elements of it appearing in the Mali Empire. If you look at the works of the Arab scholar and historian Al-Umari, and Emperor Abubakar of Mali actually sailed west with a large fleet and never returning. Some are still speculating, but we know that these places back in the days were occupied and ruled by us. So that would be, we can go into the details of the history, fine work, but please read They Came Before Columbus, and you will see that the argument that the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, the Malians, and other groups, the Inca god, sun god, Inti, so similar to our Ra and our solar deities. And if you look at the way they did their terrace farming in agriculture, you can find lots of it. I must also add a caveat that today, if people can't find the material on the internet, they can't find it in the libraries, they actually assume that it doesn't exist. They also simply take it that every knowledge that is taught at the ivory tower institutions is the all knowledge that has to be there. And unfortunately, that knowledge is very limited by the instruments that are used to record it. And that's why I'm pointing back to the crystals and the crystalline kingdom for more knowledge and more depth about how our evolution happened. And the other part of your question, looking at the gold, can you please just, come back again? Because I seem to have lost a bit of track in that. And please be brief with the gold question in Ghana.
Yes, Prof. So my question was that Ghana seems to be endowed with a lot of the crystals that you've described. But if you look at our people, our royalty, all of that, there seems to be an overfixation on gold, whereas we have other types of crystals, including diamonds, and that we could also be highlighting. But there seems to be like gold. Ghana, we have gold, and that's it. So I was wondering if you could throw a little light on that.
I mean, you are right in a lot of ways, because when you look at what they show and adorn themselves with and bring into state regalia, it's mostly gold that is highlighted. But it's not just gold. In fact, when you look at our modern technology today, they cannot work without the crystals formation and the crystal kingdom. So typically, gold's power and influence is enhanced with other kinds of, crystal combination. So when you look at the crown jewels in the King of England's crown, for instance, it's a combination of different types of, crystals that come together and for different reasons. So it really depends on what you want to amplify and want to, bring into being. That determines the kind of crown that is worn. So among our kings and queens, gold, because in this land, it's the land of gold, literally speaking. That's why when Europeans arrived here, they see gold nuggets. They thought that we didn't know what they were used for. But we had a use of our gold in adornments. It was used in our money system and etc. But the other side of your question is really that why are they fixated? I think they are actually using other kinds of crystals other than gold. You may be aware of this. In silver, we have manganese and the other crystals that we have here. In the monetary system, you are very right, because over time, the gold standard became well established as the leading standard for supporting the money. But even though we are a gold producing nation, in fact, currently we are the #1 in Africa and the 6th probably around the world in terms of the total gold stocks. The last time I checked, we are actually churning out around 3.4 or so, million ounces per year. So we have abundance of it. So it should be in our currency, but we don't have gold in our currency. So that brings us to the part of your question. We are actually not fixated about gold. If we are, and as a student of finance, I should see Ghana's currency not be vacillating the way that it is vacillating. There's virtually very little gold. We don't have reserves. And this is what the Sahelian boys found out, that when they tried to check the value of their reserves at the French treasury, one, it was not what was telecasted, and two, they could not access it. Ghana is actually suffering quite more seriously than what the Sahelian guys are going through. We don't have total control over what is mined here. This year in the budget, they talked about gold actually making it into the small scale mining, what they call galamsey, making it into the GDP statistics. It played a key role. That's just what they could not track, that they call galamsey, what they could not measure, what they could not control. But if you look at what can be controlled, what they report, which puts Ghana on top, it's actually a tiny fraction of what we can measure. So at the Nile Valley Multiversity, we have actually looked at the hydrocarbon map. We have done estimates. We are running into trillions and trillions of gold. We don't even have measures for that. It is also known that, every house in Ghana here, when their ancestors were setting up these places, they set them up with these powerful crystals. So we are all rich people. So we are not fixated about gold at all. Otherwise, we cannot be complaining and borrowing if we actually are fixated about gold. So yes, the potential for gold is there. What is taken out is mostly, completely siphoned, and we don't have people who have the balls. We do not have men who have balls like the Burkinabe and the Malian and the Nigerians. So they have shown right now by creating a new financial system that is backed by gold. We have been writing about this for aeons. Even about 3 years ago, the United Nations contracted me to do some work. We put out this information a long time ago. So this is not new. So we are not fixated about gold. In my view, we don't control the gold that we have. So we can't even be fixated about something that we don't control. So unless something happens within our psyche that makes us turn inward to recognize the gold that is locked in us and stop us from going to beg for crumbs when we are the real holders, the wealth of this planet. So my great brother, this is what I can say about what you have asked.
Thank you, Prof. But
I agree in one sense we are fixated, but in another sense, you can't be fixated about something that you can control.
Yeah, well, I think that you probably we probably have different definitions for what I mean by fixated, because really, this is what I mean by fixated. Look at the country that we live in right now. Look at the water bodies that we were bequeathed with all these years. All of a sudden, look at the mad rush for what? Gold. Look at the Galamsey menace. For what? Gold. We are fixated on gold. Maybe for the wrong reasons, but we definitely are fixated on gold. And what do we have to show for it? Nothing. So that's what I mean when I say fixated. I don't mean that we are fixated.
No. So we are on the same point then. We are
basically that's what I'm saying. And even apart from Galamsey, right? We are like, Sabio me pacho manu dasumina so otikoko nana, and that is supposed to be the biggest thing ever, right? Because my nana is sitting on gold. Why is my nana who's sitting on lithium not as important? Why is the nana who's sitting on diamonds not as important? We are fixated on gold, Prof. So that's what I meant. Give thanks.
All right. No, you are right. And I agree with you totally. Now, the other part of gold that we don't talk about very often is that if you look at the atomic and the molecular structure, it is one of the few crystals that take that tetrahedron formation. And therefore, you can create and build different types of vehicles based on it. So when you do the research, check something called monotonic gold. So in monotonic gold, some people are able to use it in different ways to elongate lives. So when you see the royal, houses, for instance, they tend to live longer because they know the secrets of gold. And when you study the emerald tablets and the works of Sitchins, for instance, you see that there were people who from another planet came here because they had destroyed their planet. And one of the things that would be needed to be able to repair that planet would be gold. And gold was in abundance here. So that's part of the history of how those seemingly so-called beings came to enslave the people here, and they have turned us into the slavery in the gold mines today. So gold is actually connected to longevity, to immortality. And as the technology advances through the financial systems, blockchain, encryption, and the like, we are going back to what the ancients already knew about gold, that it is the life force that can perpetuate life for endless numbers of times. So when back to your fixation question, then you are very justified, because that's is one particular reason. The spiritual purposes, most of the kings and queens know this, beyond the monetary value that is ascribed to it by modern finance and economics. I give thanks.
Radio culture. Radio culture.
Manos and Empresses, do we have any more questions?
Well, just a quick one. Just a comment. So I just wanted to say, just make one quick comment on the OMEC. So, it is known that Abubakar II left the region now known as Mali and sailed with over 100 people towards the Americas. It is also known that there is actually a what do you call it? I don't want to use the wrong word. Thing in the water. Well, it's kind of what's this thing? Current. There's a current.
Yes, an ocean current. Yeah.
Right from the West African coast all the way to Central South America.
Yeah.
Which, if you put a boat on, literally, it would just take the boat all the way without you even putting in much effort.
Yeah.
But so and then we also know that there's a lot of African architecture, which is even in these places today, right? So that is also another confirmation of the fact that Africans have been in the Americas for a long time. And even in the Grand Canyon, there's also evidence of ancient Kemetic knowledge and artifacts over there. But bringing it to more recent times. So when Mussolini and the fascists attacked Ethiopia, it was Mexico that was the first country to support Ethiopia when His Majesty made his statement at the League of Nations. Now, Mexico also was recognized by His Majesty on Victory Day, which is May the 5th, in Ethiopia. And Mexico also donated one of the Olmec heads to Ethiopia. So one of the Olmec heads is in Ethiopia today. And as a testament to the fact that even the modern Mexican nation knows that the Olmecs are African people who came to the Western world to establish the Olmecs, from which other more modern ethnicities came from. That was my first point. My second point is that contrary to popular belief that the so-called royals in Ghana display gold because of its monetary value. Gold is actually, as mentioned earlier on, that used because of its spiritual value more so than the monetary. The monetary is more of like a very modern explanation as to why a king or a chief or a queen mother may have so much gold on them. I think to a point to kind of conceal the real uses of gold, but all that gold is primarily put on as part of spiritual rituals. So I just wanted to chip that in right quick. Give thanks for the reasoning.
Give thanks. Your culture, precisely as I would have liked to, but you made it even more clearer. On the 2 points, it's exactly the thought that I wanted to explain. So thank you very much for this reasoning. I'm really enjoying this because it took us back to ancient history, the history that they never taught us in school. And all the evidence that he mentions connects us back. In fact, Mexico as a country today was only whitened in the last century or so. And today, if they are playing football, you can see your black brothers in the team. And you can see it. So the Yucatan Peninsula till date is still largely populated by our ancestors and our brothers and sisters. Yeah. So all the points are in alignment with exactly what I have already indicated, and I'm so grateful for the contributions. That makes the reasoning much more richer because then we can all relate to. And please visit some of the ancient books that was written by our own ancestors, John Clark, Ben Yohanan, and Chancellor Williams, and Van Settima. Those books, and especially the work by Sheikh Anta Diop on the African origin of civilization. A couple of months ago, when I was at the British Museum, almost all the monuments that I have never been able to see in the lands that I visited, you can find them there. They have taken those huge monuments. So anytime you find yourself in London, just pop in and see for yourself what they call the Shabaka stone, the Rosetta stone. They have replicas of them, even including one of the fake skulls that they talked about as one of the 13 crystal skulls. But we know that our ancestors had been all around, and we are still here. Give thanks.
Yes, give thanks, Prof. Please, I wanted to find out, I've heard about crystal skulls, crystal palaces. Please, can you help me understand what they mean, please?
So in the Earth's interior, you find that there are these formations, especially in some of the sacred points that we have already mentioned, when the outer civilizations went through those cataclysms. Many of our ancestors either teleported themselves into higher points, or in the case of Machu Picchu, they just moved the city away from the conquistadors. They could not be seen. And so they have created portals of beautiful cities, adorned with crystals. And those crystals have been harnessed as the energy system. They don't depend on fossil fuels as we do. So in the inner earth, and this thing has also been disputed many times by people who have only, studied up to maybe the PhD level, and they haven't gone beyond that in the regular sense, and not to put that as a derogatory, but in the entire system of education that we have organized, we have tried to show that if we cannot explain it and we don't know it, then it's possibly pseudoscience. This is hocus pocus. But as our brother mentioned, if you look at even the science of traveling by sea, our ancestors could read that when I catch this ocean current here, in less than 1 hour, I should be in Latin America, from Namibia. I don't need to travel days. They understood the waves. They understood the patterns. So they worked with nature. That's what we ought to do now. So in looking at the crystal skulls, the indigenous people recorded in their histories that there were beings from the stars who came to Earth here and constructed. And so today they've even disputed that the pyramids were built by us, and these were built by aliens. But the indigenous people have always known that we inhabited different planets. We created different systems that have reached graduation stages. And we came here, which is a smaller and beginning planet, to lend our knowledge. So it was the ancient mothers, what they call the seven sisters in some of the Greek mythologies. But if you go back, you see that it is our story that they are talking about. So they knew of the existence of the Sirius star. It's a binary. Later they have found out the seven more than that. And the seven sisters are not just 7, but far more. So from the constellation of the Pleiades to the Arcturus to Sirius, we had many of us now listening to this conversation. We have come here from different places to lend our knowledge, to participate in the Earth drama, and to be part of the fun and the variety show that is taking place here. That is the fun we signed up to. And this is the exact time that we got to know and remember that it is our stories that have been told over and over again. But because we have forgotten, we see this to be somebody else's story. So the 13 crystal skulls, according to, or skulls, as some would say, according to the indigenous people, was a gift to the earth people. So our ancestors that came as us, then gave certain signs and symbols that when we are about to return, these are the things that you will get to know about the fact that we were here and we created this. So there were, some say that there were actually 52 crystals. I don't know which one is true, but what I know is that these crystal skulls contain information, they contain the memory, and they contain the history of our planet, of who we are and what we have done. And according to the Mayan calendar and calculations, in fact, the 13 is attributed to the Mayans. And anytime you hear 13 in our indigenous studies, it refers to a pivotal point, a tipping point, a watershed movement. So 2012 would have been one type of point like that. That's why they said. And then it's also a stage of evolution beyond who you are and what you are now, becoming the next version of yourself. So 12 will be the completion point, 13 will be the launching pad for another wave of evolution. So like just in the musical scale, when you hit the octave, you start on the higher note thereafter, and you can hit another octave. So it is this series of different higher points of our evolution that is talked about, that when the time is up, these 13 crystal skulls, by right now, they are scattered all over the planet. They will start communicating, and they will be transmitting codes and messages that will force the people of the planet to recognize the need to connect and to get back to naturalness. And they have also given some of the Hopi prophecies have indicated that when we see the appearance of the white buffalo, the wailing rainbow sign will signal that we are now at that particular moment. You can also look at the the records and the prophecies of the great grandfather Vusumazulu Credo Motwa. And he gave some of these also in some of his teachings about the times in which we find ourselves in respect of the predictions that we have in the crystal skulls. So the 13 represents the original grandmothers whose ingenuity led to this planet that we have. It is a form of transformation and healing. In most of the mystical traditions among the Jews and the Muslims, and their calendars have 13, moons. And Native American traditions will normally also honor the 13 moon times, which could also be the annual menstrual cycles of the woman. So when you look at the 13 crystal skulls, therefore, they represent the human cycles of discovering their personal medicine. You also find this in Christianity. The Jesus Christ and his 12 apostles will be the 13. The Mayans mastered this. And the Mayans, again, these are our ancestors. They were the keepers of the time. They understood that these will be the tipping scales of us transforming from mundane existence, graduating out of trauma into the best and the higher versions for ourselves. And so, so there are so many of the stories that you find on the internet, especially there's one of these crystal skulls. It's actually made of clear quartz, as the first question started with. And you will see that everything that we talked about in the clear quartz. Some cases, there are other versions that are in amethyst, purple-like, color. But it's literally the clear quartz that we have already talked about. And these stones are going to be talking to each other. They will wake us up, and they will let us rise to the power that is in us. And that's the story, the indigenous prophecy about the 13 crystal skulls. When we check in our reality, actually, we are in that moment. We entered it many years ago. But Black people are still trying as victims. Instead of seizing power and directing the course of events, they are crying that somebody is oppressing them. And that's what the message of I that we have to deliver is for us to return to our innate power and wake up, grab what is ours. We don't need to beg anyone for freedom. Freedom has never been given on a silver platter. So that is the moment in which we find ourselves. I give thanks.
Sir, give thanks, Prof.
Radio,
Please,
culture.
Prof, I have another question, please. I want to find out. So, for people who have had their, let's say, crystals, gold, other mineral resources mined from the earth, for people that continue to live on the land and seeing the gold, everything removed from the land and maybe, let's say, sent to another land. Politically, economically, we see the impact on nations like Congo, even in Ghana. But spiritually, please, can you describe the impact it is having on indigenous people who constantly have their lands being extracted, these minerals or crystals being extracted from their lands? Thank you, please.
Thank you very much, my brother. It's a very big issue to look at within the time that we have, but we can attempt, and then other brothers are welcome and sisters are welcome to make a contribution. But when we see what is going on around the continent, it's the same story, whether it's in the devastation that has been left in the Obuasi mines. You get to Takwa and just trying to get into the city and see the massive amounts of wealth that is taken out every year, day in and out. Or you go to Nsuta and see the manganese mines. The story, you don't need to even go to the Congo. That would be too far for us and move from our reality. So the story is almost, in my mind, the similar story, that we haven't yet realized where we are. And we haven't been able to grab hold of what we have. So we will talk and go back to the same point, that until we open our eyes from the sleep and slumber, the predators will easily be preyed on by other lesser predators. So let me put it very triply like this for now, because we've been talking for a long time. And
thank you,
brothers and sisters are welcome to make a contribution to that.
Radio, culture.
Can I say something? Can I? Am I available? Is there room for me to speak?
Yes, please.
Yes. So, Prof. Imhotep, as we listen, we say you the point. You talk about portals, right? And as you start, I know say you talk plenty already. So this one, they're making no stress out too much. But the question be saying, I hear you wants to talk about decentralized finance, right? And while you were talking today, you said something like, maybe the time is we're not there yet because we're not seeing it. But you showed in your video, you showed an image of a plant. And you said, this is a new species of finance, of money. And if you could spend a little bit of time just elaborating on that, because I think we need some shifts here. Listening to the questions and all these very rich questions that have been asked and the answers you shared, it looks like we're in a state of some shift, right? Some transitions are happening as always. And as you've already been able to speak to that thing about a new form of finance, right? It will help us more if you could elaborate on how small. That'd be my little prompt here.
Thank you very much, my brother. So when I look around, all I see is really wealth. It's just the way my own mind maybe has been wired over time of doing this over and over again. So when I take a plant, a simple tomato plant, for instance, that's what I see as the money that they talk about. It's not in the city itself. Right now, when you buy tomatoes at the Legon night market, one is 5 cedis. I have one tomato plant that is giving me 20 tomatoes every 2 days. That's money right there. So now the farmer is trying to harvest his tomatoes, not to enjoy it, but to go and exchange it with paper. And what they haven't realized is that day in, day out, more of this paper is being printed and minted, and the coins are being minted in the mints. So almost on a minute by minute basis, that value is not constant. But when you take a crystal, we said about gold, silver, salt, and the rest. But when you take it in the context of a mango or a tomato, that value is intrinsically in the beauty and the elegance that the tomato exhibits. And here in West Africa, tomatoes are almost unmissable in any meal. It's almost impossible. So that's your money you are eating raw like that. You can exchange it if you want. If you have more of it, like we have in the gardens, then you can exchange it. But now what we are going to is that, and the Russians have showed us, if the Europeans want to buy our oil, they must bring like for like to exchange. You can't print euros and come and exchange for my crude. So that's how that kind of financial system has been crashed from the days of the the sanctions. And then Russia being excluded from the SWIFT, you just go and evolve something else. So that's what our brothers are doing in Burkina Faso. So when you see the money, it's actually in agriculture, first and foremost. Most of the gold, other than the gold crystal that we know, is purely in the land. So decentralized finance is that the money that we talk about is not the one that is locked in the central bank vaults. To be honest with you, that money doesn't even exist. You print your bank statement and the bank is charging you for every single transaction. What money do they actually have? You want to print a bank statement, they charge you. The insurance companies, they're taking premium. So that is not money. It's not wealth. It's just one type of fictitious paper that we have all come in social agreement that we'll use it for this length of time. So in my conception and writings, I think that time it has actually outlived its usefulness. In fact, ever since they went off the gold standard in the 1970s and this money system came into being, it has lost to exist in reality, but human beings still believe in it. So decentralized finance is finance at the level at which you are in your home. What can you put value on that can be used to exchange for what you want and that you can give to somebody to fulfill a need that he or she has, that you have the ability to provide. And that's what decentralized finance is. As we go deeper and deeper into this very decade and century, more and more of this type of understanding will become so clear to people that they cannot miss it. That it's no more optimal for me to go and tire myself, every day for 5 days, 8 to 5 in traffic, and receive that type of reward as a compensation for my energy. And then people will begin to divert that same energy into some of the things that we are talking about. So maybe I just use the tomato as a simple example, but there's the sunflower that you find. And it can be neem tree, it can be mango. So I sat here during the mango season and I just saw the 2 mangoes in my house. For every mango that dropped, I could calculate the entire GDP in it. And I can map that if this mango within a season of 3 months can give me 3,000 mangoes, I was running into billions of Ghanaian cedis. That is how we measure gross domestic product. And it's produced right in my house. So this place is very rich. You have moringa trees, that is the wealth right there. And if you have fertile land, Africa has 60% of the world's arable land. So they talk about this in the figures. So how can Africa be poor? So decentralized finances get into community-based understanding that within your home, within the parameters in which you occupy, it's all that there is for you. And that is the new thinking around money and finance. And it is also the technology that will get there even faster and quicker, because the blockchain systems and the new layers of evolution that will come about will teach us that as we move from digital to more non-digital spiritual forms of energy, we see that it's the circulation rather than just a medium that is used as a symbol for its expression. And that circulation is the total amount of energy that we have inside. And so the crystal vibration is really about how powerful and are you able to amplify this particular energy. And that's what gets us into the message, Zion. I give thanks.
Greetings. The money thing is something we have to take serious, because whether we like it or not, we have to start spending money in the near future, not too long to come, because of this new world order and all this thing about digital ID and the way that we having the digital money or digital currency, whereby your amount you have to be able to spend have to be under control. You know, these things now, about 30, 40 years ago, we've been discussing it as huge man demand, because we discovered these things a long time and we knew that we will come and meet it in the future, but we didn't prepare well towards it. Otherwise, some of us now cannot even be living in the city and still depending on money, you know, because we were warned years back. So as we still have some few years to wait before the thing is officially or fully implemented, we should start send our minds towards the living without the money thing. If we have to all live in the countryside, raise animals and things and grow food, you know, so that we can have our own sufficient, we can be self-sufficient, so that we don't have to depend on the Western world, so that we'll be caught up in this thing they are planning to do, whereby if you don't have I think there are certain things you don't have. If you don't have the digital ID, you can't fly, you can't buy in the shop, you can't do this and you can't do that. And some of us wouldn't like to have such an ID. So it is better for us to start plan well and plan towards, you know, abandoning money like this and start live the natural life again. Give thanks.
Thank you, brother. That's very on point. And that also comes through us consciously choosing to create newer societies. We can band together if we are vibrating at the same frequency, join together, join forces and minds, bring our energies together and to create the things that we can depend on and use. For no nation that depends too much on the external can survive what is with us here. People talk about it as if it's still a reality that is going to manifest. A few months ago, I was in London carrying cash. I couldn't spend it. I brought it back. In certain departments of the government in South Africa, they don't take the cash anymore. So in many parts of the planet, they have even moved beyond the digital, money. So now we are beginning to learn about what cryptocurrencies are. People are excited about Bitcoin. That thing has busted many years ago, but now that it's coming here, so we are all evolving at different paces. So we will, there will be time for us to, adapt. But as we see what is happening in other societies, it's a rallying call for us to begin to build alternatives. And so for my reasoning tonight, if there's anything I want to drum home, is that what do we take from this knowledge to create alternative societies within us and amongst us, so that you can live outside of this narrative. Actually, all the doom and gloom, it's not going to go too far if we have robust systems. When the Sahelian boys announced they were taking themselves off the CFA front, France just went to block them and put sanctions, but they had already created a better system that is working, which is commodity backed. So you can decide to delete them from your systems. It's not going to have the effect. What they did was everybody who has money in the regular way in the banking system, they just doubled it so that you don't panic. If we have to do that now, it will create a lot of upheavals because we don't have the political structures that will be amenable to that type of change. But at the individual level, we have that power. We can band together with people who have lands. We create new agricultural communities, agroecology ecosystems that supplies more than half of our food at least. All the meat that you need to eat, cultivate them, the chicken, the rabbits, the fowls, the guinea fowls, the goat, the sheep, and then to the plants, tomatoes, basic tomatoes. We all still have to buy. We also have to buy gardeners. And so those basic things that we can produce by ourselves when we are together in a community, say a community of 10 houses, this person can specialize in turning this into some pito or some other form. Somebody can also specialize in making food out of what we are producing in the community. So for the decentralized finance system to actually work, it has to be community-based, and it is this community-community interaction. So when I moved to the Little Legon community, what I've said is that we can create a common currency here that we call the Little Legon money. And amongst us, we understand that if this sister has water, which she used her energy to create, and I have enough land, we can just band together and make this work for us so that whatever food that we produce, some can go into trading and some can be shared among the community. So whatever talents that we have architects living amongst us, engineers, music, makers and creators, high quality creative artists that are living in the society. We begin to harness that. And that is where we are moving. And the brothers' contribution is also, again, to the point. We will have to begin those steps now, not any other time now. Give thanks.
Give thanks, Prof. It's 10 p.m. And if there are no... Prof, permit me to ask the last one. The pathologous press that you once talked about at the Nile Valley multiversity, please, has it got more deeper meaning from the point of view of crystals, vibration, and our awakening? Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I wish I have more to say about this, but just briefly, the time, because I also need to get to do something else after this. Pathologos library actually exists on the planet. It's the place around the Aegean Sea. So if you find somewhere around Greece, towards Italy, thereabouts, the Pathologos library is located around there. At the moment, you can't visit it. It's actually not in 3D format, but it's there. So when the library of Alexandria was ransacked, there was a total destruction of the library. In order to save the ancient records, the keepers of the records, our ancestors, the guides, took them into the Pathologos library. And to the topic that we have been discussing today, this library actually has the material recorded in a crystal. So you find amino acid computers that can chart the raising of the vibrational frequency of mankind on the surface and at the center, or what we call the inner earth. And then you can also find all the histories, the Atlantean and Lemurian societies. So you can go to that library and visit there and learn about our ancient history. It's all recorded in the crystals. As we said, the crystals contain the memories of our great civilizations. So when we were creating the Nile Valley system here, we looked at some of the records and realized that, well, we haven't seen much of pathologists talked about in this physical reality. And there's knowledge that is transmitted. In fact, most of the things that I have researched and found out, I found them from the pathologist library. So we created a press, a printing press. It's actually a fifth world printing press. We launched it a couple of months ago at the Nile Valley University. And this is a printing press that is advocating actually launching what we call decentralized knowledge dissemination. So we're printing books and journals and all the material that the commercialized press has kept away from the people. We want to make it available free of charge, so people can go to our website. All the stuff, material that we are producing, they can tap into it. We created quite a number of companies. Those who are entrepreneurial can tap into that. And Pathologous Press is one of those entities within the Nile Valley Multiversity system. Give thanks.
Give thanks, Prof. Imhotep. I don't see any more hands up, and it looks like we have exhausted our questions. At this stage, we'll invite your closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Blessed brothers and sisters, to all the crystal beings and elementals whose stories we have become the instrument for this transmission, we thank you. To all the ancestors, past, present, and future, and to all those who have listened to us now and in the future, we give thanks. It has been a great honor for me to be a vessel for this transmission. And the message of the crystals is simply to wake up to the power that is locked up in them. I hope that this reasoning will open the doors and the new portals for us to look at the crystal beings in a different light. They are all around us. They are in us. They are us. We are the crystal vibrations of Zion. We vibrate at higher frequencies. We transmit higher octave performances. This is the music of the spheres, the music that awakens and touches the heart. So as we awaken and increase our own vibrations, we get into the higher forms of existence, which the next versions of ourselves will show us and manifest. May the great ancestors, His Imperial Majesty, all the empresses, bless all of us as we take leave of each other from this reasoning. I give thanks.
Radio culture.
All right, give thanks. We give thanks to one and all for your time, your presence, your contribution. We'll be having our next reasoning next 2 weeks. That's on the 25th of May, 2025. And our topic will be Rastafari as Blackness. Our presenters will be Ras Kwesi Anochi and Dr. Oponwadie. So we give thanks and we expect that the next 2 weeks we also avail ourselves for another reasoning. Come prepared with our questions. Thank you all.
Radio culture. Radio culture. Transmitting online. Radio culture. Radio culture.